Good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome to you from me, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow here at Friends of Europe. I'm speaking to you from Town Hall Europe, the Conference Centre for Friends of Europe here in Brussels. Welcome to all of you. This is the third and final session in our 2020 Friends of Europe Balkans Summit. On the two previous days, we've been looking at the future political direction of the region and yesterday the impact of climate and the green economy. Today, we're going to take up the issue of digitalisation and just how fast and how effectively the Western Balkans can adjust to the new digital economy and what all of us here in Europe and elsewhere can do to help them in making that process of transition as smooth and as widespread as possible. But before we get to the topic, some of you may have missed yesterday's session. Unfortunately, I did, and therefore I'm very keen to see this video, which is going to briefly recap on the main conclusions of yesterday. So let's have the video, and then I'll introduce today's session.
We've provided policy advice to governments of Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, and Kosovo to help them introduce renewable energy. We financed 2 big wind farms in Serbia, 1 in Montenegro, 2 in Kosovo that actually, when they are completed, will account for 10% of the country's electricity use. And in Albania, we worked on the solar sector, and they got the best price globally ever in this for solar power.
It's the moment now for all Balkan countries for stopping buying the expertise, to create our own expertise about climate change and increasing our local capacities for climate change. For example, in Albania, we don't have a single bachelor or master degree for climate change. I know even in North Macedonia is the same. Even in Montenegro is the same. So we have to increase our own capacities for this. It's our obligation to increase our own capacities in this. In Balkans, we don't want to invent the wheel again, for sure, but we need to find the best way, the proper street, where we should move along together with common ambitions as Balkan countries.
Every sector, from public administration to education, finance, manufacturing, tourism, agriculture, etc., are in transition, and we're working hard to steer this transition towards a more digital and greener future, and as you said, a more just future. As a country, we're firmly committed to the green agenda and the greener recovery by implementing actions in climate change, the circular economy, biodiversity, and in fighting air, water, and soil pollution, and by promoting rural development for securing sustainable food systems. A green recovery from this pandemic, the COVID-19, gives us an opportunity to rapidly develop this region's capacities in technology and innovation. Digitalization is an important element to safeguarding productivity and delivering services during and after the pandemic, and as well towards an economic resilience.
COVID-19 and pandemic is crisis, but crisis can be a chance. So we have to take opportunities from the chance and make the best of it for all of us in Western Balkan and in European Union and in whole world.
Well, you've seen already that in talking about the green economy yesterday, several of the ministers and speakers mentioned the link with the digital economy as well. Now, 2020 has been a good year for the Western Balkans politically in terms of moving closer towards Europe. But as the region moves politically, we also have to make sure that it moves economically and in societal terms as well. And in this respect, of course, transitioning to the digital economy is so important for the economy, for the quality of life, for jobs and economic opportunities, for the development of civil society and for the improvement of governance. So I noted a number of key questions that I very much hope that in today's session we can explore and answer. First of all, we need to know how well currently is the Western Balkans equipped to compete in a digital economy. How can digital tools improve those things that I mentioned, the quality of human life, of society, regional cooperation, better governance, the creation of jobs and opportunities so that young people don't take their digital skills elsewhere, but keep them in the region and contribute to local growth. So how can digital be also a source of empowerment of women, of young people, of civil society more generally? How can it improve the quality of governance and government accountability, being more responsive to the needs of the citizens? Regional cooperation, I mentioned that already. Can we build new coalitions, new networks around the theme of digital? And of course, as always, what can the European Union and other international government bodies, the UN Development Programme, which is represented here today, do to help? What do we expect the locals to do for themselves, and what can we do to speed that process on the way? Particularly at a time, of course, when in the European Union itself and in the European Recovery Programme, as well as in all aspects of future programmes and the new financial framework, the transition to the green economy and the digital economy are the priorities. But can some of that trickle down and spill over into our neighbours in the Western Balkans? So lots of questions. I can't possibly answer them myself, but fortunately I don't have to, because today I'm delighted again to welcome an absolutely top-flight panel, top-flight group of speakers who are going to take us through all of these thorny but essential issues. First of all, I'm delighted to welcome back to a Friends of Europe platform a true friend of Friends of Europe, Mirjana Spodaric-Egger, who is the Assistant Secretary General in the United Nations Development Programme, and more specifically the Director of the Regional Bureau for Europe and the Commonwealth of Independent States. I was very fortunate to be able to have a strategic conversation a few months back with Mirjana, where we touched on many of these issues, and I'm very delighted that she's agreed to come back today and to kick us off and enlighten us on that. I'm also grateful to welcome as our second speaker Genoveva Ruiz Calavera, who is in the European Commission, where she is the Director for the Western Balkans, so we cannot have a better EU spokesperson than her on these issues. She is in the Directorate General for the Neighbourhood and Enlargement, and I'm also very grateful to Veva, as we call her, for agreeing to step in at a late hour to replace the Commissioner who was called to a very important meeting this afternoon. So Veva, thank you so much for your flexibility. Around 2:30, it will also be my pleasure to welcome Minister Tatjana Matic, who is the Minister of Trade, Tourism and Telecommunications from Serbia. We're delighted that she can join us from Belgrade. In the meantime, she's being represented by the Assistant Minister, Milan Dobrojevic, and I'm very grateful to you, Assistant Minister, for also stepping in and joining us today. And last, but by no means least, you cannot, of course, talk digital only with high representatives of international organisations and governments. Digital means the private sector, the fountainhead of innovation and creativity, driving the new technologies forward and the way in which we use them. So we need to see to what degree the Western Balkans is geared also in terms of its talents and its private sector, its startups, its innovation sector, to be able really to take this effort forward. And to enlighten us on that, I'm delighted to have Vladimir Vulic, the co-founder of Digital Zoo Me. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Vladimir, which is an NGO for digital social change in Montenegro, to give us precisely that perspective. So four of the best today, and I would like to begin with Mirjana, who has agreed to go first, and in particular, Mirjana, to ask you, what has been the impact of COVID-19 on the economies of the Western Balkans, on human security, and how do you think this is going to help or hinder that digitalization process that we were talking about? Will the economic downturn delay things? How do you think, with all of the work that you do for the UNDP, that digital tools can improve things like gender equality, greater access of women in particular to the labour market and their role in society more generally? And your third question, if you don't mind, lots of questions, but I know that you're going to enlighten us. What is the role of the United Nations Development Programme in working with governments to push this agenda forward in the region? So again, welcome back to Friends of Europe. Great to see you. And now it's over to you to kick our discussion off this afternoon.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for inviting me again and back to one of your conversations, which I always greatly enjoy. And of course, I will continue to be a supporter of the Friends of Europe. But I'm also pleased to see Veva and other colleagues on the panel and in the audience as well. And I look forward to the discussion. I can't say that anything but that this is very timely, because digital technology and innovation are at the center of today's economic development debate, and something that UNDP has been preaching in the context of its actual strategic plan, which is going to be renewed next year, is coming to the fore, which is we have to bring technology into development cooperation, and we have to drive innovation if we want to accelerate sustainable development across the regions. I'll come back to that, but this is now an opportunity with COVID for us, together with our partners from the European Union, to look at how we can push towards bringing diplomacy, science, technology, and innovation closer together, and how we can break the silos, not only between the sectors, but also between our institutions further, in order to do what is necessary in the region of the Western Balkans. You asked me, Jamie, how big the impact is on the Western Balkans, and I said that in our last conversation, it is going to be significant. And the most significant impact will be seen in terms of unemployment and the struggling of small and medium enterprises, and especially also micro enterprises. The economic impact of the pandemic will also predominantly hit those who are already more vulnerable than others, women, youth, but also, marginalized groups. And this is something we have to be aware of as we look into recovering better. Now, coming back to the issue of tech and innovation, UNDP set up a network of 90 accelerator labs last year, pushing for innovative approaches in development cooperation, and 3 of these accelerator labs are established in the Western Balkans, one in Belgrade, one in Sarajevo, and one now in Skopje, the latest one. And even before COVID broke out, we knew that digital transformation was a huge opportunity for the Western Balkans in terms of development. I'll give you an example based on something we are developing in Serbia, where our Accelerator Lab has teamed up with Digital Serbia Initiative, an organization which has the mission of building a strong and globally competitive digital economy in Serbia. Now, we know and discussed this with the government that Serbia has, as many other countries in the region, one of the fastest shrinking populations, especially in the working age, and we need to counter that. So together with Digital Serbia Initiative, we organized an assessment session looking at how globally competitive the digital economy in Serbia is, and we analyzed how digital professionals from abroad have decided to live and work in Belgrade. And during that research, we actually realized that Serbia was a country attractive to digital nomads, and that there was potential to building a digital economy. But of course, you can't just focus on the digital piece. You have to look at a whole portfolio of issues in order to drive that development. And this is the portfolio that we have presented now to the government and to our partners in terms of accelerating development, and especially sustainable development in the country, but also beyond, because similar issues are, of course, occupying the governments in the neighboring countries of Serbia as well. Now, if we look at the European Union's digital agenda for the Western Balkans, then we also see that there is a lot of potential and that this agenda is driving technology and its utilizations towards inclusive growth. Now, if we want to use the momentum of the pandemic, we can combine this with our own lead role for the UN system on socio-economic recovery coming out of COVID. And in that role, we have conducted with our partners a number of assessments and have developed recovery plans, have invested our own resources into developing smart projects that will help us scale recovery from COVID. And as I looked at the proposals across the Western Balkans, which we have just approved and are starting to implement, all of them have a strong digital component. Now, digital for us is an element of our recovery offer, in addition to governance, social protection, and green economy. But what we see is that digital is also an enabler of green economy, of improving social protection, and of improving governance across the region. So it's a vertical as well as a horizontal tool in developing, in helping the countries and the government developing their economies. Now, let me give you just 4 examples before you move on to the next speakers with regard to the Western Balkans and where we focus on. The first element to look at is digital economy per se. In Bosnia, we are developing a very comprehensive plan to drive digital economy, not only by investing in assessing the preparedness of micro, medium, and small enterprises for digital transformation, but also by reviewing the regulatory frameworks, by assessing the concrete support that needs to be provided to the economy and to the businesses themselves in order to thrive and to transform. Which also shows us that we cannot only look at the hardware and the technical part of digital economy, but we also have to look at the policy frameworks that have to be smart and accompany investments into this area. In Kosovo, and this is the second area of our engagement, we use this digital transition not only to support micro, small, and medium enterprises, but also to drive green economy and to promote circular economy in the same process. Thirdly, what we need to do, and what we are now testing out amongst other countries in Montenegro, is to boost research and analysis. We will shortly publish a national human development report in Montenegro, which will focus on digital transformation as a tool to respond to COVID-19. We want to address in this report, as I said before, not only the opportunities of system reform, but also the impact of on the labor market, on education, and we want to focus on the creation of an accountable and service-oriented administration. We also need to look at incentives, and we need to analyze where the game changes are in order to transform this into sustainable solutions for the country. Now, fourthly, and this is also something you mentioned, Jamie, at the outset, we need to drive regional initiatives and we need to promote regional cooperation going forward. So I'm very proud to say that together with the Regional Cooperation Council and myself with Melinda Bregu, we will on Friday present a report on joint areas of action for all our partners and ourselves, of course, on how we can promote women empowerment and economic empowerment in the region. And in this regard, a very important element is the promotion of women in STEM, in the so-called science and technology areas, because this is the future skill that the labor markets will need in the Western Balkans. And we again need a comprehensive approach and an all-inclusive approach to building the capacity for the future. Now, just to give you an example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there's no secondary education in technology, and only about 2% of all the students studying at university actually study programming or programming-related issues. Now, this does not correspond with the growth we have seen in digital economy in the country. So unless we bring our investments in human capital together with the needs of the labor markets, and we start investing in the future of the labor markets, we will not be able to transform fast enough and recover adequately from COVID. Over to you, Jamie.
Joe, thanks very much for kicking us off with such a splendid and very comprehensive, very rich, very detailed overview. It's very impressive in terms of everything that you're doing there, but also I take your points about the need to analyse and find the growth areas, the game changers, as you called them, the need to use COVID-19 to push the process forward as part of recovery, the need to put this into the broader framework of the circular economy, the green economy. Very sobering what you said about the lack of emphasis in the education systems, only 2%. I don't know what it's like elsewhere in Europe, but clearly that's far too low. And finally, thanks for flagging up that you're going to produce with the Regional Cooperation Council an interesting report, particularly on the empowerment of women in STEM. On Friday, we'll keep a close eye out for that. By the way, I always, as the moderator, forget to mention the key administrative things at the beginning. As everybody online today, no doubt, is already part of the baby Zoomers, if I can call you that, your generation, you probably don't need to know that you can raise your hand or you can put something in the chat and then I'll bring you in when we get to question time. Or if you are looking at the live stream, you can use the hashtag Friends of Europe, the hashtag Balkans Summit. So no excuse for not being able to put your question to us if you have one. So please do that as quickly as you can. I also did not want to forget to mention at the beginning of our discussion that we have a special group of people participating in the Balkans Summit. They are youth delegates from the Western Balkans who are participating in a UNICEF program, also sponsored by the European Union. And I understand they've been extremely active in asking all the best questions so far. So hopefully they're going to keep that tradition up today as well. So a warm welcome to you, youth leaders from the Western Balkans. Great to see you. Now we turn to the European Commission. I've already introduced Veva, and I've already sort of foreshadowed the questions I wanted to put to her, which is, of course, as the EU put so much emphasis on the digital economy and its own future programs, how much of this is going to naturally trickle down to the Western Balkans, where, of course, the EU has some of the countries already as members. Others, of course, very much on track now to draw closer, negotiating in some cases already their accession. But to what degree is there a need for special EU programs dealing with the Western Balkans to put an emphasis on this? And again, what can the EU do, but what do the locals have to do to help themselves so that the EU can help them in good turn? So Veva, it'd be great to get an update from your side on all of these things. And if I didn't ask you the right questions, at least give us the right answers. Thank you again for joining us at short notice. We really appreciate it. Is there sound?
I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear me?
You succeeded. Yes.
Good. Thank you very much, Amy. And thanks to Miriana for her fantastic presentation. It's always a pleasure to be with her in these panels. It is a pleasure to represent the Commissioner as well today. I'm sorry he cannot be here, but I'll try to do my best to convey a very important message, is that everything we do in the EU to foster the EU recovery, we try to do exactly the same in the Western Balkans because they are our future member states. So certainly, for instance, the EU recovery plan is looking into at least 20% of that recovery plan will go towards digital recovery for the European Union. And the same logic, the logic of a twin transition, which will be green and will be digital, applies in our engagement with this region, with the Western Balkans, because we want them to really close the gap towards the European Union. They cannot lose time to really catch up with the European Union. And that's why our priority in the region is really to ensure that the digital agenda, which it's a silver bullet, like Miriana said, it's a silver bullet to really bring green, to bring all the other necessary transformations that we want to see. First message is that one. Whatever we do in the EU, we want to do in the Western Balkans, and we're already doing. I am very proud to say that already 2 years ago, we launched a very specific digital agenda for the Western Balkans. 2 years ago, we did it. We did it with Commissioner Gabriel at the time. She was responsible for the digital portfolio. We did it in Skopje, and since then, we have been working with the countries and with the region as a whole in implementing the digital agenda, which is underpinned in a Commission staff working paper, where we will provide the avenues of engagement. And this is exactly what we have done this year, but launching as well the green agenda for the Western Balkans. So everything we do in the European Union, we carry over for the region to follow suit so that we don't waste time in preparing for that accession. We have a very ambitious agenda for the digital, and it is going to be underpinned on 3 pillars. The first pillar is, of course, investment by the European Union. And that's why, as you know, on the 6th of October, Commissioner Vaheli put on the table an economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans, which has a commitment on the Commission side that out of the new instrument for pre-accession, up to 9 billion euro will be going into investment for the region, really hardcore investment to close the gap. The second pillar of this communication is to say we have to have reforms in the countries, in each country of this region, to underpin the necessary investment climate. And that is especially important for digital. And the third pillar of this communication is that the region has to work together as a region to overcome fragmentation and to create conditions for investment to come across the board. So I think these are important messages for everybody that are listening to us, because, we are willing to bring the funds. The authorities and the governments, the administrations have to accelerate the reforms. And the region that has come to the Sofia Summit only last week with a declaration that they are going to create a common regional market, which incorporates this concept of the mini Schengen that had been as well circulating in the region. But that is, more importantly, is a regional market that will be inspired in the EU legislation so that that market will be ready to connect to the EU internal market. Digitalization is an important part of this economic and investment plan. We have a full flagship, which talks about, digital infrastructure. And certainly in that flagship, and Miriana has already noticed, we look at the possibilities that digitalization brings as well to not leave anyone behind and address in particular the needs of the more vulnerable segments of population. And I want to talk about youth because you told us that we have youth components. We believe that the services, businesses around services, which are around the digital world, is an area of job and growth in the economy, which is especially suited to give opportunities to the youth. So we are extremely keen to see that flagship in the economic and investment plan develop. And a very important message, because we have, of course, our colleague Vladimir from Montenegro. In the economic investment plan, we have agreed that at least up to 9 billion will come into direct investment in forms of grants, which is the value of the EU funding. It's really grants that can leverage as well loans and can create a bigger, critical mass. But more importantly, we have as well created the Western Balkan investment framework for guarantees. And in that guarantee scheme, we see the potential to generate up to 20 billion more by crowding private investment. And this is an area, digital is an area where the private investment has a major role to play. And by giving this, insurance through the guarantees that the European Union is willing to pay so that we can compensate for the risk that the private sector might not want to talk in that region. We want to see the private sector together with the authorities playing a very important role. Last message, I mean, we have a very close engagement with the authorities. You know, we have ministerial meetings at least a couple of times a year. I mean, we have had just a couple of weeks ago a ministerial meeting in which we were discussing with the ministers of the region, for instance, deployment of 5G networks and interoperability. And in this digital summit, we were very glad to see the region agree to cooperate in all these digital areas, and to commit to the EU approach, which is another important message for us. I mean, this region has the ultimate destination to be part of the European Union. Yep. So everything we do on the digital area has to look into, you know, the EU way of doing things, and in particular, you know, the EU risk-based approach towards the cybersecurity of the 5G networks, so that we can help the region to reap the full benefits of the accelerated digital transformation. We are working, like I told you, at national level, but at regional level. And Miriana mentioned Mrs. Bregu, Belinda. The Regional Cooperation Council has a very important role, together with, of course, with the CEFTA Secretariat, to put the common regional market into place. And in the common regional market, the digital aspect of the regional market has a very important weight. And we have already had successes. This common regional market will continue fostering the creation of a roaming-free area inside the Western Balkans that can be connected to the roaming area of the European Union. And we have certainly we have supported with all our means the creation of the regional roaming agreement. This is a primary example of concrete benefits that the digital agenda can bring to the citizens of the region, and I think particularly to the youth, because they are the ones, together with the entrepreneurs and the business people, that travel more into the region, and then they see in their pockets how good it is to have, you know, a roaming-free area. So let me just say, for us, this agenda is an agenda of growth. It's an agenda, of course, of equality, of bringing, you know, and it's an agenda of governance. And Miriana said it all. I mean, for us, digital is an opportunity for e-government, which, you know, invests in the digital public administration to increase transparency and to provide better services for the citizens. And we have the COVID pandemic, and the COVID pandemic has demonstrated to all of us in the European Union and in the region that every single investment we have done on digital has made that stronger and more resilient. So this is the way to go in the future, and we are certainly very keen to engage with the authorities and with the private sector and with the citizens in order to make it a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Veva. Thanks very much. And again, thanks for giving us a very quick but very comprehensive, richer overview. Investments, reforms. Also, you emphasized the possibility of using digital to promote regional cooperation. But you put in the broader context also of achieving a common regional market, help to the private sector. That's very interesting. And also, I appreciated, as somebody who's dealt with cybersecurity a little bit, that you also stressed that we have to look after the side of digital, which of course facilitates communication and business, but the darker side too, which is that we protect ourselves from cyber attacks and cyber criminals. That's the other side of the coin, obviously. Before I turn to Minister Matic, who I hope has been able to join us from Belgrade, two very quick questions, please, quick questions and two brief answers. First of all, we have Marinko Reyes. So Marinko, would you kindly unmute yourself and now intervene and ask your question? And then afterwards, from the UNICEF delegation, Trina Hotti. But first of all, Marinko, please.
Hello, Jamie. I haven't actually asked for the floor.
Oh,
so
right.
I'm using this chance just to say hello to you.
Okay.
So your comrade from all NATO days.
It's great to see you, Marinko. As I saw you come up, I thought it was to do more to say hello to me. But thank you.
All the best.
It's very kind of you, Marinko. Then let's go to Trina Hotti. And Trina, I hope that you're not just saying hello to the moderator, but you're going to ask a question.
Yeah. Hello to everyone. I hope that first you are well. and it's my honor to be here. I am Trina Holte. I'm from Kosovo, and I am a youth delegate from the UNICEF Kosovo program. I am also a youth and child rights advocate, and also facilitate the Youth Reference Group of Kosovo. That is a group that is composed by beneficiaries of UNICEF programs. But I would like just maybe to add something related to the tech savvy that was using as a term before. In Kosovo, for example, the percentage of the households that have a home-based internet is really high, is 93%. But I'm asking to you how many families have technological devices to provide for their children or young people. And this challenge was especially during the e-learning processes, during the online learning, while a lot of young people and a lot of children didn't have access to the education learning that was going online because they didn't have a laptop or a PC. And for a lot of families here in Kosovo, it's a luxury to have a personal iPhone or to have a personal laptop. So I want to ask, how do you think that the usage of technology these times was extremely high, but how do you think that this usage was healthy for young people especially, and do you know that everyone had the same chances to have access to these technological devices?
Trina, thanks. That's a super question because the role of education and the ability to use IT to promote IT skills and knowledge. You can't sort of get the skills if you don't have the equipment, right? Your iPhones and your PC. So let me turn to Mirjana and then fight also to Veva to see if you have anything more specifically on what we can do to get more tech into the education system. Is it just an economic barrier? Are there other factors? Do we have to change laws or regulations? Are there good examples that we can point to maybe that some of the countries of the region can follow? Anyway, Mirjana, please.
Thanks, Jamie. I see the challenge. I see the challenge of having access to the right technology and then having the skills to using technology, and it's not done with just internet access. But as in all these areas, you have to start with assessing the needs, and then you have to start looking at how you can change and improve access to technology. And you have to look at the existing regulatory frameworks. You have to also look at the budgets of the national and municipal governments and how they allocate their resources, how they invest into the education system. But it won't be done just by going out and buying laptops and handing them out to the students. You need to have a comprehensive plan to that. Thank you.
No, I understood. That point is well taken. Is the education sector something, Veva, that you are particularly looking at in your own programs, or are you really leaving that very much to local governments or local education authorities to try to sort out in the best way that they can? The mute button.
Sorry, I think I have to do 3 times the mute button. 3 questions to unmute me by the host. Yes, we are very engaged with the authorities on this. I think there is 3 levels of engagement. We are now doing an assessment, an assessment with the help of UNICEF and the World Bank and all the different international partners that are together on what else can we do in the education sector. And I think for sure this aspect is going to be part of it. But I think we're working on 3 levels. I mean, we give assistance, direct support to the budgets of the country so that and we have budget support operations, for instance, a very important one in Serbia in support of the education sector. We give as well, of course, we have a lot of attention at high-level education. And I have to say that I'm very pleased that the youth of this region are very actively participating in programs like Erasmus, and we have now pilots on vocational educational training in high-level education. I think what is important for us now is to see how can we close the gap between what we say primary and infant education and the high-level education, and that's where the studies are now coming into motion. And I would like to say that, of course, there's a problem which Mirjana has underlined. We really need to see, there is economic barriers to access of technology. But I wouldn't want to be bleak. I think we see a lot of talent in the region, and in particular, for instance, in Kosovo, but not only. I mean, every year we have startups awards to, young entrepreneurs starting new businesses. And it's a lot around digital skills. It's a lot about access for vulnerables. And it's a lot about, improving the situation in the schools and education. So I'm extremely positive that overcoming those barriers, we have a pool of talent in the region that is going to have, a very good impact and a lot of success in helping the region and the European Union moving forward. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you, Viva. Thanks very much. I understand that Minister Matic is still delayed, but I did mention earlier on that we are very privileged to have the Assistant Minister from Belgrade, Milan Dragicevic, with us today. Please excuse my inability to pronounce names correctly. I even have trouble with my own. But Assistant Minister, we're delighted to have you with us, and maybe having heard already what the UNDP and the European Commission have said about the region, you're there, you're running the activities in telecoms and tourism of a very major actor in the region, of course, which is Serbia. So how do these themes from the national perspective in the region resonate with you in terms of the importance of the digital economy, the way you see it as driving growth and prosperity, the prospects for regional cooperation? It would be great to have your view. Again, we're delighted to have you with us today, sir, and I'd like now to give you the floor for your intervention and your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such nice introduction, and allow me to send excuse in the name of our minister, because she's delayed with something critical at the moment, and I will have to substitute her today. So when we speak about regional cooperation, and especially in the area of digital, we can freely say that we have fantastic cooperation among the Western Balkans economies. We have now 3 or 4 years of cooperation on specific projects and very concrete results. Let's mention only some of them, like West Balkans roaming agreement, which leads to no roaming free zone between West Balkan economies. Then we have a regional interoperability agreement. Then we have also, for the moment, bilateral agreements for mutual recognition of qualified trusted services between Montenegro and Serbia, and between North Macedonia and Serbia. But we hope to have soon between all entities in the West Balkans. And most important, the colleagues from the similar departments, from similar ministries and NGOs are cooperating years back on the exchange of experience and on learning from each other on how to implement the projects and how to get startup community better, how to learn from experiences, for example, how Kosovo did broadband development, which was very, very representable, and now we are doing something similar here, etc., etc. So what we can say is that at least when we speak about digital economy and digital ICT cooperation, region is getting a lot of fruits out of it, and will surely continue to do it, especially with new common regional market plan for 2021-2024 being adopted and approved by all stakeholders. We look forward to continue cooperating with our partners in the region and to get to something we can call common regional area, economic area, so we can work even without borders.
Assistant Minister, while I have you, could you say something about the education issue that came up just a few moments ago when we had a question from one of our young participants? Is it a problem to get young people interested in becoming sort of digital natives? Presumably not, because they all communicate with each other using the social media. But in terms of producing the kind of skills that you need for your economy, is there a bottleneck in the education system, do you see?
You might say there's a bottleneck, but we have to be quicker than we were maybe in the past, because new reality is that change, the world is changing much quicker than than it was happening a few decades ago. Education systems tend to be inertial in some sense and tend to slowly change and adapt. That's the reason why we need to complement formal education with informal one and with the different activities that would complement and that would get our youngest interested into and get them into the right direction. Things are changing, especially with COVID, for example, in past few months. A year ago or 2 years ago, we were thinking about getting a bigger level of confidence and trust into the digital world, you know. And now we don't have, now we have everybody interested, everybody simply stepped in because they had to, from youngest to the some special groups like older people and maybe some vulnerable groups. So now we have to change our approach, especially from the digital ministries and the digital sector at all. We have to protect those groups that are now buying online, that are learning online, and maybe a year ago they would never do that at this moment. When we speak about the youngest, we see a lot of problems with them adapting to the online education system, and there is a different approach, and this is something that needs to be discussed a lot more, and we need to get to the conclusions as soon as possible in order to be able to implement some changes into the system to get them attracted in a proper manner in the whole process of education, which is now different.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Minister. We'll come back to you. Please don't go away because we've got questions coming in from the audience. But in order to complete, if you like, the tableau, the overall view of where we are with the digital economy in the region, I said we must, of course, have a representative of the private sector, the innovative sort of community of startups, which often are so key to getting the ideas out there. And I mentioned that we are lucky to have Vladimir today, who I spoke to him earlier this week, and he clearly knows his stuff when it comes to the sort of questions that have already come up. Is the private sector happy with the skills that the education systems are delivering? Is the environment, the business environment, propitious for helping innovative startups? When you get a good startup in the region, is it quickly bought out by, I don't know, somebody in Silicon Valley and the startup moves, or can this innovation stay in the region, and how can it stay in the region? And Vladimir, looking at it from your perspective, what would you like sort of governments or the EU or the UNDP to do to sort of make it easier for you to do your business? So give us a sense from the grassroots, if you don't mind me using that phrase, how the digital economy sort of looks to you. Is it booming ahead, or do you fear a sort of a general lag behind the rest of Europe? And welcome, by the way. And thank you for participating.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts on the digital economy in the Western Balkans. Well, there is a famous saying that there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. What we have experienced since the beginning of this pandemic is exactly that. Weeks where decades happen, especially when we have in mind the adoption and usage of digital services, which have skyrocketed in the meantime. If there is one positive thing to come out of this pandemic, is that the need for digital transformation and the importance of digital economy is now clear to most people. The digital economy ecosystem of Western Balkans is in early stages of its development, even though it is rapidly growing each year. Some of the biggest organizations aiming to advance the digital economy of the region originated, exactly as you said, as grassroots initiatives organized and funded by businesses and by civic sector wanting to create a support system for those facing similar challenges. These initiatives have been providing mentorship and support to entrepreneurs, to startups, opportunities for knowledge exchange and networking, as well as advocating for changes in the national fiscal and legislative policies. A limited number of Western Balkan companies are achieving international success, with some of them even becoming global players in their limited niches. While the number of digital economy initiatives and success stories is growing in numbers, they remain scattered across the region with little coordination and knowledge exchange between stakeholders, which is often why they fail to create synergies. However, recent years saw the emergence of tech parks, incubators, and accelerators, which are aiming to provide both financial and non-financial support to entrepreneurs. These initiatives are also at the early stages of development, with their impact being limited by the regulatory framework, as well as the maturity level of the local startup system. Most governments in the Western Balkans region have only in recent years begun working on developing policies that would allow society to benefit from digital technologies and are adjusting their frameworks in a way that encourages entrepreneurship and innovation. Majority of countries still deal with bureaucratic processes that do not differentiate between startups and other businesses, making no allowances for their founding process or having tax-specific tax incentives. At the same time, while there are incentives for foreign direct investments, there are either very limited or none for private investors. The good news, however, is that Western Balkan governments have embraced the reform process and have developed strategic plans, including building capacity to foster innovation and delivering better digital services. This indicates that there is a clear need for creating a regulatory framework on both national and on regional level that would work towards creating an environment that fosters innovation and growth. So here is my take on what these three directions for policymakers could or should take. Well, number one, we should create a supportive business environment. Existing policies can be better improved to better serve the digital economy and to be more encouraging towards the creation of new businesses and new jobs. New policies should be introduced to incentivize businesses to invest in research and development, social businesses, education of their employees, and pursuing sustainable development goals. Digital transformation of public administration services should aim to rapidly deploy cost-effective, secure, and inclusive e-services. The second thing we should do is create a supportive environment for gig economy workers. Gig economy workers often do not pay any taxes, which leaves them with a higher net income, but at the same time, their access to healthcare, public pension fund, and a credit rating is greatly reduced. In order to fight the brain drain we have already mentioned today, governments have to find a new way to create a more sustainable future for those taking part in the digital economy, especially those who are acting as outsourcing service providers or working as freelancers in the foreign markets. New policies should be designed that would represent a safety net for those that now find themselves outside the social protection systems. And number three, we should create an education system which is fit for the digital economy. Current higher education institutions are largely lagging behind the needs of the digital economy in the region. They often offer outdated programs, and the range of ICT skills graduates are trained is rather limited and is focused mostly on software engineering and disregarding necessary soft skills. This forces young professionals to learn by doing, which automatically puts them behind their EU peers at the very start. In the meantime, this has led to the emergence of many informal, but mostly ad hoc, programs offered by NGOs, digital hubs, and businesses looking to fill the existing education gap. Governments should also design a more flexible education system that could equip students with skills needed to adapt to conditions in an ever-changing digital environment. They should also encourage investments in education on the part of the employers. And to conclude my initial remarks, at the beginning, I mentioned that COVID-19 will go down as the great accelerator of digital transformation. We should look at it as an opportunity to change things for the better. And this is an opportunity we need to take right now. So to conclude, let's build together, not just the new normal, as we like to say, for the Western Balkans, but let's build the new better for the Western Balkans. Thank you, Jamie.
No, thank you, Vladimir. Thank you very much. And we all agree that COVID-19 is the great accelerator. And maybe that will be one of the good things, although it's difficult to think of anything good about COVID at the moment. But maybe 10 years on, we will recognize that there was an opportunity there. And as all of you have said, we need to develop that because, of course, it has pushed that digital economy along faster. Vladimir, I'm grateful to you because you said, along with the other speakers, that things at the kind of macro level are moving ahead. There are strategies, there are plans. Everybody now has woken up to the importance of the digital economy. Things are moving, but are they moving fast enough? And you mentioned that when it comes to the details, there is still a lot to be done. The education part that we've spoken about already, the responsibility of employers, the need to sort out the gig economy where much of the talent lies, but often with fewer rights than other non-digital workers. The direct foreign investment and how you encourage that in a responsible way, of course. The regulatory framework. And very sort of, what we call bread and butter issues, but they're key, like tax, those kind of incentives. Government can help, but not with too much red tape and bureaucracy. And how do you also attract venture capital into the region as well? So thanks for taking us through some of the more sort of bread and butter but fundamental issues. Of course, if people are going to sort of found companies and start sort of generating business activity and what we can do to respond on those details, maybe that's a good topic for the discussion. So ladies and gentlemen, it's over to you now. And first for the questions, we've got things coming on the Twitter feed. And I now turn to my colleague here at Friends of Europe, Kristal, to give us a sense of what the Twitter sphere, Kristal, is asking at the moment.
Hi, Jamie. Can you hear me?
Indeed.
All right, great. So our Twitter question today is, in the race to digitalization, do the speakers envisage conflicted interest in terms of providers and contractors, for instance, and thus foreign interference, so China, Russia, Turkey, etc.?
The question of who the technological sovereignty and autonomy, and how you balance the risks of becoming dependent upon foreign suppliers. Assistant Minister, Serbia is a country which partners with a large number of different regions of the world. So perhaps I could turn to you first. How do you see this issue of assessing, the reliability of foreign suppliers, how far one goes down that route, or maybe the advantages of diversifying among a large number of suppliers? So could you give us a sense of your experience in Serbia, and maybe Marjana could come in on that too, and also Vladimir. But Minister, to you first and foremost.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond first to this very, very important question in this moment, but also not only now. Actually, diversity in implementations of technology is critically important, and what we really do try to achieve here in Serbia is to through contracting different vendors for critical infrastructure and for critical services, we try to achieve practically to become independent of any specific vendor. And this is probably the only approach that we could recommend to anyone. And for example, our operators of electronic communications operating their networks on solutions of different providers, from Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei, and similar. In our data centers, we have Oracle databases, but we also have IBM, we have Microsoft, we have different solutions, and we can freely say our country wouldn't stop if any of those vendors would turn to be not really confident and reliable anymore.
Yes, thank you very much. Presumably, you also have those Serbian companies that are able to supply you in the market. Do you find that the local technological economy is good enough that you can also use national systems as well, and not just buy things that are made outside?
Yes, if I can add, I was, for the moment, I was sticking with the technologies which we cannot make on our own. But obviously, for 95% of the softwares or devices or similar, we are trying to support and to develop with our own companies and to use our own solutions. Obviously, that is the solution. But for some technologies, it's simply not possible.
Yeah. You
have to rely on the global vendors.
Absolutely. And I think that's a lesson that applies throughout Europe at the present state of affairs as well. Thank you, Minister, for that. Vajana, do you in the UNDP sort of give advice specifically about how countries can develop their own sort of autonomous technologies, IT industries? Is that something that you think in the long run is good, or is globalization still able to sort of take care of all of our needs?
Thank you. Thanks. It's a tricky question.
Indeed, it is.
You know,
it is for all of us. Yes.
There are several layers to this that need to be addressed. Let me start with the normative challenge that comes with digital transformation. There are a lot of voids still that need to be filled in terms of also protection of individual rights, quality assurance. So it's not a question of where the companies come from or whether we work with China, or work with Russia, or work with the European Union. It's a question of who complies with the standards that at the national and regional level have been agreed as the standards that need to be met. And we have a starting point with the Sustainable Development Agenda, and that has to be our compass. Whatever is being done has to support sustainable development and an improvement of the life of the individual. So that is what we are working on with the governments, to assure that whatever is being done meets the criteria and international standards that the populations also want to see met. And the same goes for corruption, for transparency in governance, etc. And here we have, a dual role that technology plays. It can play as an accelerator to development, but it can also play a role in bringing transparency into the processes and transparency into how oversight is being ensured at the national and local levels in particular. But the normative progress will never be able to meet the pace at which technology is advancing. There will always be this lag, and technology will always have an edge and always have a bigger edge as we go forward, because our intergovernmental mechanisms are simply too slow. And I think Deputy Minister raised that as well. So how do we become faster? We can become faster in putting in checks and balances by just changing the way we work. It's not about the UN and the EU and the government and the civil society. We have to introduce a platform approach whereby everybody is part of the decision-making and is part of overseeing implementation of certain policy frameworks. And there, again, youth plays an important role, because they have to inform the process as well, also in terms of where their aspirations are for them, in order to stay in the region and to contribute to the economic development of the region. And they will have very concrete demands. And coming back to what Trina Hoti said in the beginning, and to what Vladimir also stressed again, we have to work with the governments and with our institutional partners on the policy frameworks. And that's where it starts. We need smart policies. We need policies that are informed by global experience, but are tailor-made to the local and national context and challenges. And once we have them, and once they are established in the right way, we can start looking at implementing, and that, also bringing in the private sector into funding some of the needs and equipments that are then going to be needed in order to digitize the society, the youth, and to bringing them closer to the labor market. One last point, Jamie, nearshoring. I think we have an opportunity there. Of course, there's the global market, but we also saw in COVID how vulnerable the global supply chains are. So we have to also look at building capacity at the local and national level. Thank you.
No, thanks, John, and thanks for taking that question on very much head on. Also, your point that it's all about, not so much foreign suppliers, but common standards and norms, of course. That's where the real sort of issue in terms of sovereignty and independence and security lie. The need for transparency, the platform idea of a multi-stakeholder approach to this, the right policy framework. But of course, we had just a couple of weeks ago in our security summit here, an active debate on European strategic autonomy and what it means. And this idea of achieving a better balance between globalization and depending upon very remote, very complicated, long-distance supply chains, and having a certain degree of resilience at home against shocks. It's not all about autarky, obviously not. That's never been a good idea, but at least in terms of measuring the risks and balancing that, that's going to be one of the big challenges for the European Union, and of course in the technology domain as well. Vladimir, when it comes to how you see, lots of different foreign network, foreign sort of technologies all in the mix, does that sort of give you, from a business point of view, greater opportunities to exploit because there are so many different providers out there, or does that make the business environment more complicated from your point of view?
Well, the simple answer, Jamie, would be yes. So it's both.
I love those answers. But normally there's a but after the yes, but maybe not in this case, right?
Well, first, since we have moved not just our businesses online, we have moved a lot of parts of our life online. The cybersecurity issue is becoming very, very important. On the other hand side, the technology aspect is developing much, much faster than our ability to regulate it. So from the aspect of business, yes, it's always a good thing when you have a variety of different suppliers, vendors, and partners to work with. However, on the other hand side, the one thing we need to absolutely be sure when delivering is security. In my initial remarks, when I mentioned the e-services that the governments should be offering, one of the key words I said was exactly secure. So dealing with multiple vendors is a great idea. However, as Ms. Eger-Spoljaric said, setting and then meeting international standards should be a main thing. So safety first and then a variety.
Thanks very much. All good, clear answers. Well, we go back now to our young UNICEF delegates. As I said, they're being particularly active today, and it's great to hear them. And we have Olga. Olga, please, if you're out there, unmute yourself. You'll come on the screen. There you are. Thank you. And over to you. Please ask your question.
Thank you. I'm Olga Devic. I'm from UNICEF Youth Board in Serbia, and I would like just quickly to share the youth points of view on today's topic. So during the lockdown,
absolutely, go ahead. Let's listen to them.
Thank you for the floor. During the lockdown, adults have often reached out to us as young people for advice how to use some particular program or video call platforms. And allow me to remind you, 1 year ago, the same adults have told us that we spend too much time in front of the screens, and we are just wasting our time trying to figure it out how to build, for example, new website or platform. Now they realize that wasting time, to call it like that, is actually of immense importance for everyday life. And young people are visionaries and leaders of the future, and this is proof for this. So it's extremely important to establish intergenerational dialogue in the field of digital skills and technology development in Western Balkans and in beyond. On the other side, the pandemic created a digital gap between young people and children as well. And I think that only investment in digitalization, if we focus only on that segment, that could cause even greater rift in access to digital technology, which will particularly affect those in vulnerable groups, such as children whose families have low income, such as families who are in special care centers, Roma children, children with disabilities, and so on. So having in mind that there is an urgent need to build the system infrastructure which which will ensure that technology development is implemented fairly, and that every young person, every child or citizen in 21st century has opportunity to join equal life chances. I think that young people are key to transition our societies to a more digitalized and modern future, and therefore important that they become the future ambassador and voice for change in this important topic. We as a young people have the ability and skills to develop technologies and innovative solutions in service of those who need them, and by that transform a region into, I can say, gold mine of innovation and technology. Beside all of this, we mentioned education. Education definitely has a crucial role to play in raising awareness about the urgency of addressing the digital transformation of the region. And there is also an urgent need for fostering partnerships between governments, private sector, civil society, professionals all across the region in order to support young people's participation and innovations toward more inclusive and sustainable societies. I believe this could be achieved by maybe establishing some regional youth startup centers, which could ensure that regional youth potentials are treated appropriately to respond to the challenges and to the needs of the region, and by the same time providing youth with an opportunity to stay in the region, to prevent the brain drain, and to create new job opportunities, and by that lower the rate of unemployment. The future of the region definitely depends on what we do now and how we treat young people potentials, ideas and talents. One step toward active youth engagement in the digitalization issues are made in Serbia, and I would like to mention that. The newly digital skills development strategy in Serbia incorporated the voices and opinions of young people, which was gathered throughout the Report Serbia platform. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank the Ministry of Trade, Tourism and Telecommunications and the Ms. Matic and her team for her active commitment to this. And I'm really looking forward to some future joint actions and more engagement of youth in digital issues and the area of work.
Well, thanks, Olga. Thanks, Olga, and I'm sure the assistant minister, was delighted to hear that his good work and the Minister Matic's good work has been noticed and appreciated. That doesn't happen to governments every day, believe me, that they get a vote of thanks and recognition from the citizens. But that's very positive. Olga, you didn't ask a question so much as you made a statement, a very powerful statement of the stake that young people have in all of this. And I'll turn to Mirjana if I can, because I know that she also has this preoccupation with children, young people. They're the future of the digital economy, but of course they can sometimes suffer from it as well. There's of course always the issue of abuse online and protecting oneself and being protected online, and the security of the systems, data protection. So many issues come into this, but of course it was pointed out earlier, if they cannot have access to the right tools in school, in education, they then can start with a deficit, which can harm their job opportunities as well. So they're both, if you like, the risk group as well as the salvation. So how do we balance that? Anyway, Mirjana, any more thoughts on how the digital issue applies to your own work, of course, in protecting and helping young people?
Thank you. Again, there's so many different ways to answer these questions, but let me take it to, again, two sides of our work as an example. One is helping institutions, national institutions, but also, non-governmental institutions develop digital tools that actually help prevent some of the dangers that come with this lockdown and with the digitalization, especially in the area of domestic violence as well. So we've done a lot in the region also with a number of partners to develop very concrete, instruments, apps, hotlines, and so on to grant people better access to protective measures. But there's the other dimension to our work, which we are discussing with our partners, and which is a direct outcome of, if you want, the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is the fact that you can never look at one sector alone if you talk about development and if you talk about promoting inclusive growth. And that we see very prominently in the depopulation portfolio that we have built. I'm calling it the depopulation portfolio. Of course, it's not that, but it's an area where we work very closely with not only our Serbian partners, but also with UNFPA and other UN agencies to help the government analyze what is required for the young to see their future in the country and in the region. And we've heard it from the UNICEF representatives. I mean, that is the key question for us. There will be no sustainable development in the region if the young are seeing their future elsewhere.
Yep,
and that is what requires us to review labor market policies, social protection policies, governance at all levels, the education system, the health system. You know, if there's no childcare, if there are not good schools, people will leave even though they have a job. What about job security? Is social protection linked to formality of labor or not? So going out of COVID, and as Vladimir said, we need to build back better, and we need to become better at connecting the dots. And it brings me back to the policy question. We need the frameworks, we need the regulatory frameworks that will allow for a better future in the region. And we know that, and we are working closely with the EU and with our partners to achieve that. And it's also, I think, the government's ambition to build forward in that sense. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. And again, you point out always very well that the digital economy doesn't work in a vacuum as a standalone. It has to be integrated into a much broader set of measures that provide for that kind of social protection, equality of opportunity. If you don't get the ecosystem right, then the digital side doesn't produce the effects either. And so thank you for that. We've still got some questions coming up. So I'll also, of course, bring Vladimir and Milan, the assistant minister in two. I recognize Ella Ionescu. Ella, hopefully you're still out there. Yes, you are. So please unmute yourself in one stroke, which is very difficult for most people to do, but you do it, and put your question, please.
Great. I don't think it's a question per se, but a few reflections just to introduce first myself. I'm Ella Ionescu with UN Women Regional Program for Europe and Central Asia. And I apologize if some of the issues that I will quickly raise have been addressed already, but...
no, but we want your perspective, so give us your perspective.
Yeah, I have joined later the call because I was in other calls. But what I wanted to bring to the table, I mean, we heard a lot about the role of the youth engaged in the digital sector and the opportunity they have to contribute to the greater social capital, the equality and empowerment. But I also want to bring that the role of women, an increasing number of women that really need to be engaged in the digital economy, that can enable women to participate and be active leaders, particularly as the Western Balkan countries now are aspiring to become members of the EU. Now, with the digital access, I think the technology, transformative power, a more gender-inclusive culture in the tech sector, I think it can become a reality. And by connecting more women and young girls as well, but including from, as we have heard and from other interventions, that including from marginalized groups and from the urban and the rural settings, in terms of how do you navigate the STEM space? How do you help build a cadre of women ICT experts and digital entrepreneurs from the Western Balkan regions? There are a few ways that we heard as well, Mirjana just mentioning, in terms of promoting that gender-inclusive digital economy to different domestic policies, frameworks, and responses, promoting that gender-inclusive digital development, but with special emphasis with leaving no one behind. and benefiting all of them from the digital economy, the marginalized groups, women groups, youth, disabled, and refugees. But strengthen the capacities of the government authorities and institutions in exploring what are the new approaches to enable women and girls to access these ICT tools and the training and address these gender-related opportunities and what are the risks of the digital development and the digital gender gap. And I think it's important here looking at how we can foster domestic partnerships and platforms to promote and launch these women-led digital and STEM tech services and products.
Yep.
And then one more point that I like to just
Yep,
to make
Ellen,
that
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, not because you say important things, but given our time, I want to leave time for our speakers to answer, because this is an important question. And I know that Mirjana is very much focused on this, as she mentioned. I think maybe I also want to turn to the Assistant Minister and Vladimir to see how women can participate, as they must, obviously, for everybody's benefit more in these sectors. So quick final point, and then we can get some answers for you.
Yeah, and it's just maybe just last point as well, the promote that women entrepreneurship and engagement in innovation. So I think the point on innovation, the promotion of diversity and entrepreneurship that facilitate the inclusion of women in innovation projects as well.
Okay. No, thank you for that. It's an important point, and it's probably good that we get to it before we close. So, Assistant Minister, how do you see the issue of the participation of women broadly in the digital economy? Are you leaving it to the market? Do you have specific policies in your ministry to try to foster this? Are they being successful? And do we see, for example, that there is a true sort of equality of opportunity in Serbia, or how do you see the issue in the region more broadly? So, to you first, please, and then I'll ask Vladimir to say something about if he sees in his sort of innovative sort of startup grassroots world evidence that women are getting into this business as well.
Yes, thank you to allow me to respond again first for such an important topic. And let me just go straight to the point. It cannot be left to the market. No, by all means, this topic cannot be left to the market. And our ministry and the fact that it and the digital sector in the ministry has been run by a state secretary, formerly state secretary, Ms. Matic, now minister, Ms. Matic, and we have a woman which is prime minister. We have actually years back, and the digitalization front runner is our prime minister. We have a few years back of experience and some history in different world women-focused or girls-focused programs. One of the good examples, and we would gladly share now in a few sentences, is, for example, rural women entrepreneurship program, support program we had the last year, which actually gave some skills to those groups, to those women, but also visits from our at that moment state secretary gave them a lot of confidence to explore for additional opportunities, to do business, to be visible, to use the e-commerce and similar things. This program showed us fantastic results. Also in parallel, let's not only speak about rural, we also targeted with few programs girls and students in order to get them closer to technical faculties, for example, and to bridge the gap in terms of explaining them that ICT or engineering is not it's not made for men only. On the contrary,
absolutely,
we are getting terrific results. We would recommend everybody else that to commit as much energy as possible to similar programs.
Yeah,
thank you.
You're obviously onto it, Minister. You're onto it, which is very, very encouraging indeed. And you're right, having the examples at the top of politics really does sort of send a powerful signal there. I'm going to give the final word to Mirjana, who I know has this topic very close to her heart. But before I give Mirjana the final word, Vladimir, how does it look from your side in terms of the companies and the SMEs and the startups?
I will be very brief in order to give enough room for Mirjana for concluding words. Women are increasingly getting in the game when it comes to digital economy. We have a lot of progress to do. However, it's nice to see that there are more and more women each day. We also like to lead by example. So in our organization, we have a president who is a woman. We have a coordinator who is also a woman. A huge majority of our team is also women. And the one thing I really like is the brand new Minister for Digital Society in Montenegro is also a young female professional. So the one thing I also would like to stress is that one of the most promising startups to ever come out of Montenegro was co-founded by a woman. There was also a lot of talk about digital gap, a very important topic. Olga raised it, Murat from Kosovo raised it, and Trina also in the chat window raised it. We should not forget the vulnerable groups. Yes, digital can be a great enabler, but it can also lead to a huge widening of the gap. UNICEF, UNDP, and different EU funding projects are doing wonders when it comes to helping youth and making them get a better future with digital. Thank you.
Okay, well, it looks as if, again, lots of good things are happening. It doesn't mean to say that we can be totally satisfied, never, but at least it seems that women are not shunning the digital future and digital market, but also see that it's a good avenue for their future careers as well. Serbia and Montenegro clearly are good examples. Don't have time maybe to see if it's the same throughout the region. But Mirjana, as I turn to you for the final word, you mentioned that you've got this report coming out which does address the question. And so if you're producing a report, I imagine it's that you're not simply being sort of encouraged by what has happened already, but probably you've got recommendations because you think there's still a way to go. Yes? Am I right in thinking that?
Thanks. Thanks, Jamie. For the opportunity, and there will never be a conversation you have with me where I won't talk about the empowerment of women.
Absolutely.
That's something you can be sure of. But I really want to seize the moment, also given what Ella has suggested, to remind us of what I said in the beginning. The impact on women and youth in the region from COVID is going to be bigger than on many others. So we have to address them specifically. But apart from that, there is no sustainable development without the empowerment of women. Now, we have spent too much time, in my view, focusing, not too much time, that's the wrong word, but we have been focusing on advocacy in terms of women's rights, which is extremely important. Gender-based violence, extremely important. But we have to be aware, there's no protection of women completed unless they control the assets. They have to go into the economy. And if we talk about economic empowerment of women, we immediately talk about STEM, because that's where the future labor market will lie. And for this, Melinda Brego and I, Melinda from the regional coordination, is it? The Regional Cooperation Council, and I sat together about a year ago, and we said we will put our teams together to specifically address this women economic empowerment issue for the Western Balkans that we want to share with everybody. It's a report that suggests areas for joint actions in the Western Balkans for all our UN family members whom we want to work with, but also our EU partners and civil society organizations and governments, to show them the breadth and the opportunity, but also the urgency to move forward on this. And we will present this report on Friday. And I would be very pleased if as many as possible of you would join this presentation. My office is available to give you all the necessary details and the links to the event. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank us to you, and that also points us to future activity and the way ahead. Time is up, but I think that we've had a very, very good overview of where the Western Balkans stands on the digital economy, digital society. Lots of encouraging news. The region is not waiting for Brussels or Washington or anybody else to come to its rescue. It's taking its future in its own hands. We've heard lots of very good policy resources at the governmental level, at the grassroots level, the way in which digital is also fostering good regional cooperation. You can never have enough of that, of course, in the Western Balkans, and knitting the economies and civil society together, which of course is the prerequisite for ultimately knitting the politics together as well. And we've heard a lot about how the digital economy can drive forward improvements to the lives, the jobs, the job prospects, the career opportunities of women and others, and improve overall governance. So this is, of course, a transition that nobody can afford to miss or make a mess of. But if the strategic level is looking very good, and we've heard also about how the UNDP and how the EU is fully engaged in helping, in prodding, in assisting, in giving good advice. If that's going very, very well, we also know that there are always going to be details that need to be filled in, particularly when it comes to creating a good environment for business, improving education, improving cyber security, and of course making sure that we don't miss the opportunity of COVID, which has driven us all online, willingly or in some cases maybe, I'm talking about myself here, of course, not so willingly, but I've had to step up like everybody else to continue to operate. And this Friends of Europe event this afternoon is a case in point. But COVID can still, as I say, have a silver lining for the digital economy as a driver in that process. So all I would like to do at the end, of course, is thank our speakers today, who've really been absolutely fantastic in sharing an enormous amount of information, wisdom, good insight, real knowledge, and presenting a sort of a clear and very balanced view of where we are and where we need to go. So thank you, Mirjana, as always. Thank you to Milan, Assistant Minister, for joining us from Belgrade. Thank you to Veva from the European Commission. And Vladimir, again, thank you to you for giving us a very lively perspective from the innovators who, at the end of the day, are the ones who are going to drive the digital economy if it's going to be driven in the first place. This also brings to an end our 3 days of looking at the Balkans. I hope that some of you here this afternoon are the regulars, the diehards who were there on Monday and Tuesday and have had the pleasure of joining us throughout. I hope that you found all 3 sessions good and useful. I've thoroughly enjoyed being able to be the moderator to this final session. It does bring the 2020 Friends of Europe Balkans Summit to an end. The good news is that there will be another one. The bad news is that you're going to have to wait 12 months before you have it. But of course, that means that there's plenty of time for lots of very interesting issues to come up and to give us a good discussion next time round. But again, from Town Hall Europe, on behalf of Friends of Europe, thank you again to the UNICEF ambassadors who participated so actively. Thank you, audience, for being always with us. And let me wish you, if I don't have the opportunity again, very happy holidays. Take care. Look after yourself. The vaccine is coming, but not immediately for many of us. So please stay safe in the meantime, and hopefully to see you live as well as online in 2021. But from now, goodbye.